Welcome to the Lytes Out podcast. This is Chris Lytes Out Lytle, and this is our journey to document the history of mixed martial arts. I have brought with me my friend, the MMA detective Mike Davis, and together we will preserve the history and hear some great stories from the world in the era of the no-holds-barred. Thank you and enjoy.
Lytes Out podcast, we've got a very special guest today. We've got Ricardo Lamas. Ricardo, dude, you're a guy that's had some main event fights for the UFC, and today we're going to talk about your path to that. Thank you for joining us.
No problem, man. I like it. Those are some of my fondest memories the way up, so it's good to recall them and talk about them a little bit.
For sure. Well, here, you're also creating that for new people right now. Why don't we talk about like your plugs, your gym? You got a lot going on.
Yeah, I got a gym in Naperville, UFC gym. Off of Royal St. George Drive and Ogden Avenue. So I'm just kind of doing that full time now ever since kind of towards the end of my career. I retired in 2020. So about 2 years before that is when we opened the gym, and just kind of slowly transitioned into doing that full time now.
Yeah, you've actually, it's a very successful gym. Like you got into the franchise, you got your name associated with it. And, it's pretty shocking, like how many people from the Naperville area really took to it. Like every time you go by there, it's packed.
Yeah, we got a good group of members, and we're still growing and still trying to make it a big thing. We want to be, one of the biggest gyms in Naperville. So it's taken a lot of work, and especially through COVID. We opened up in 2018. We were ramping up, and then everybody knows what happened in 2020. It really set us back, but we're fortunate because, something like 30-40% of all gyms closed due to COVID. I mean, there were 2 or 3 in our strip mall alone that after the shutdown, they never opened back up. So we're very fortunate that we're still alive and kicking. And, it's because of the awesome members that we have there.
Excellent. Real good neighborhood too. But when we talk about yourself, I think what we need to start is kind of like who you are as a person. And I think nothing better encapsulates that than like your father and his story. Would you mind kind of giving everybody just a little bit of a taste of what he went through?
Yeah, sure. For those that don't know, my father, I'm half Mexican, half Cuban. My mother was born in Mexico, came here really young. My father's Cuban. He was born in Cuba in 1940 and came over in 1963. So he was in Cuba when Cuba was a free country. He was in Cuba under the Fulgencio Batista dictatorship, and then he actually lived through the revolution and then was there post-revolution when Fidel seized power. So, at first when Fidel came in the picture, like most Cubans, they kind of didn't know what to expect, and some of them supported him because he was denying his communist roots. My father went up to the Sierra Maestra, which was the mountain range where Fidel and his army were hiding out, to kind of see for himself. And after that visit, when he came back down, he saw things he didn't like, and he was actually kicked out. Funny story, but when he came down, he kind of saw what the real revolution was about. And after that, he joined the underground, and he was the president of the national student sector of his little movement, which was called the 30th of November movement, the Frank Pais 30th of November movement. And because of things he was involved in, he decided to seek refuge in the Brazilian embassy, and then from there came to the United States. Right before he went into the Brazilian embassy, he met with his second in command in his group and gave him all the papers and stuff that he had, built up, because obviously my dad was kind of the leader of that group. And, all this was moving towards something, right? Like they all these little groups were eventually moving towards like a counter revolution to overthrow Castro.
Yep.
They had a date set to do it. And there was this guy that my dad told me about, a meeting where this guy was talking about all these weapons he had, and he can even, get them a tank and all this stuff. And something, sat wrong with my father about that guy. Anyways, the night before their little movement was about to take place, all the members were arrested. And that man that my father met with, who was the second in command, was arrested, charged, and assassinated in 21 days. He was sent to the firing squads. So, if my dad would have stuck around, that would have been his fate. And it turned out that man who was talking about all the guns and stuff he had was an informant or somebody who was in the, worked for the Castro army, kind of a double agent. All those small groups were infiltrated by the regime, and that's how they captured a lot of them, and imprisoned a lot and sent a lot to the firing squads.
Yeah, your dad put his life on the line for what it is he believed in.
Yes, many times. He's told me many stories. You can make a movie out of his life there in Cuba. Literally from being shot at by Cuban police and being involved in other shootouts, and it's just crazy stuff that he had to go through. But
eventually leaving his family and everybody he knew to a land where he didn't speak the language, and he had to come knowing absolutely nobody other than with nothing other than the clothes on his back.
Yeah. Luckily, he had one brother that was here in Chicago. That's what brought him here to Chicago. But his parents, his other brother, was actually imprisoned as a political prisoner in Cuba at the time. So he had to leave everything behind. Yeah,
that's a real man, bro.
Yeah.
That's a man of conviction, high value. Yep.
I'm lucky to have been raised by someone like him that taught me real, true values that a lot of people these days are missing.
The thing is, whenever you grow up in a household with somebody like that, there's no gray area. There's nothing in the middle. It's either right or wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
That whole legalese where, hey, that just does not exist in a person's world like that.
No, you know your convictions and you stand by them until death.
Yeah. Let's talk about early training. Well, I know you started as a wrestler. What kind of got your MMA itch? What got it going?
So before wrestling, I was like in love with martial arts, and I'm actually like reliving all of it right now through my son, because it started with movies. It started with Bruce Lee. It started with Rocky, started with the Karate Kid, and then it like went into like Jean-Claude Van Damme when his movies came out. So like all those movies really shaped my love for martial arts as a kid, because I wanted to do what they were doing in there. So before wrestling, I was actually, convinced my parents to put me into Taekwondo. So kind of started with that. I was in Taekwondo for a few years, pretty close to getting a black belt, but I wasn't competing. So it kind of like didn't keep my attention too much. And then when my brother hit high school, his sophomore year, he went out for the wrestling team. And he'd come home and, bend me into a pretzel every night. So when I hit high school, I was like, I got to learn just to defend myself. So I kind of followed in my older brother's footsteps and joined the team. But it wasn't until like my sophomore year is when I really fell in love with the sport. And that was because my dad drove me out to watch the state finals in Champaign at Assembly Hall. And just watching these kids, some that were even younger than me. I was a sophomore at the time, and I watched a couple of freshmen. One of the freshmen I actually fought for a professional belt later on in my MMA career. Early in my MMA career. So it's weird how where life takes you, And after watching that, I was like, I was hooked, and I wanted to be there. I wanted to go to state. I wanted to wrestle at state. So I started wrestling all year round from then on out.
That's good. Well, that brings us to our first fight, March 1st, 2007. Pure Force in Tinley Park. I was actually in attendance that night.
Oh, yeah?
And it was shocking to me because you brought a huge crowd with you for your first bout.
Yeah, I have a really supportive family. And, talking about my dad where something's right or something's wrong. I kind of told him about this whole fighting dream I had. I remember talking to him. I was still living with him at the time. And like, we were in the garage and I was like, hey, Pop, I want to give this MMA thing a go. And he's like, Rick, I don't think that is a good idea. That is like human cockfight. He's called it human cockfighting,
John McCain, true Republican, your father.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm doing this, regardless of your approval or not. But I know the type of man my father is. He's the same type of man his father was. Like when my father wanted to go up into the mountains with, see Castro's revolution, my grandfather told him, I don't think you should do it, but go see for yourself. And I'll be here when you get back. So I knew that my dad was going to support me no matter what. And he was there at the fight. And he was so nervous that my father is like my entire life very against drinking, any type of alcohol ever. Never really drank. Like, he'd have a beer maybe once a year in front of us. But that was the first, I think, and only night he bought a round of drinks for me and all my brothers after my fight. So I think he needed to take the edge off a little bit.
Yeah, it was a quick one. Ron Gilb was his name. He won by KO. Yep. And I had heard you were a wrestler.
It was submission, actually. Rear naked choke.
Was it really?
Yeah. I ended up getting the takedown. I was ground and pounding him for a little bit, and then he flipped over, and then I ended up sinking the choke in.
Yeah, it was. I remember, like, generally at this time, wrestlers, they weren't like really well rounded. We're talking 2007, and the torque you were getting on your punches, it told me that you weren't really just a wrestler.
I felt like one still at that time. That was 2 years after graduating college, and I was at a stand-up gym. Most of the gym I was training at was, the main trainer there. I worked with him at the Park District, and he had a boxing and Muay Thai background. So that's the stuff that I was mainly concentrating on for that first fight.
You're talking about Mac at Top Notch?
Yeah. Yep.
So you hooked in with Mac before your first fight?
I knew Mac when I was 19 years old. So, like, before I even started wrestling at Elmhurst College, because there's a Park District right here by my parents' house. That was my first job I ever had. I worked in a little fitness club there, and Mac was a personal trainer there. So I literally went from like folding towels and checking people in to becoming a trainer there. And so that's where I met Mac for the first time.
So Mac's got a gym in the suburbs. He's produced some talent. I mean, it kind of comes in waves like every single gym.
Right.
And you were with him from the beginning. That's wild. So is that where you met Kyoki? One of your Hawaii main training partners in the beginning was a guy named Kyoki, who pretty good stand-up guy as well.
Oh yeah, Kyoki can bang. Just like all those Hawaiians, they like to scrap. So
they like to mostly stand, not a lot of wrestling, but
so that was another Park District connection. Actually, there was a lady that worked at the Park District with us, and her niece married Kyoki. So when they came and moved here to Illinois for a while, and I guess, Kyoki was looking for a gym to train at, so she suggested Top Notch because she worked with me and Mac, and that's how Kyoki ended up over there.
Yeah, you guys had like PJ Cahigas. You guys had a good little core group of guys. PJ also somebody that did pretty well for himself within the independent grind. Right,
yeah. We had, when I first started over there, so Mac's gym was it was Top Notch fitness and boxing, right?
Right.
So I came in and I kind of started the whole MMA wave. I kept bugging him that I wanted to do MMA. He threw me to some boxing fights first to see if I just had the balls to do it. And it eventually ramped up. And then what I was doing was, since I was freshly graduated from Elmhurst, I was bringing teammates of mine over. And we actually had a pretty tough team when I was amateur and just turning pro. So we had a lot of we had a few All-American wrestlers that were fighting with us and stuff like that. And we had some tough guys.
Yeah. Mike Santiago, also a product of that gym, somebody that's done really well for himself. Certainly people, if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably seen his name on a card or two.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Mike, I've known him since he was, a youngin' in the game.
Yeah. So how did you meet Gideon Ray then?
Gideon Ray, let's see now. So he started kind of training at the gym at Top Notch. He was one of those guys that was kind of floating around gym to gym for some of his career. He ended up at Top Notch. That was around, I believe, 2008.
Right after that.
Yeah. So he was at that title fight that I was talking about where I fought one of those wrestlers that I watched. And then me and him fought together on the same card in Cripple Creek, Colorado, which was, that was 2 hour. You fly into Colorado Springs and then drive 2 hours up into the mountains. It was at almost a 10,000 foot altitude. It was outdoors. It was.
The key word is up. You're driving up.
Right. You're already 7,000 feet above sea level, and then you drive up the mountains even more. So.
Dude, I'm in Denver quite a bit for BKFC, and it's shocking, just like the elevation and change that happens within your body.
Yes. Yeah,
At the airport. At the airport.
It's crazy. At the airport, yeah. I remember getting to the hotel and like going up stairs and like stopping and like having to catch my breath. I went out 10. That was like, but it's cool. It's cool because those are the stories that you remember, and those are the stories that you tell. Like on the way up, like it was like this. It looked like an old fucking coal miners town or something. It was like this one little strip road. It had these weird casinos on it, out in the middle of nowhere, up in the mountains, 10,000 foot altitude. It was an outdoor show. They can only have 2 rounds, 2 5-minute rounds because of how high the altitude was. The commission wouldn't allow anymore, I guess. And I was literally coughing up blood after my fight. It went 2 rounds, 2 5-minute rounds.
So the thing about that, it's not the rain, it's not the outdoor sun. The altitude is preventing us from going 3 rounds.
Yes, the altitude. It was crazy.
Yeah, a lot of mitigating factors and limiting fights. The altitude is, never in that equation.
Right, yeah.
Well, your second fight, Victor DiTolla, you win with Fight Card Entertainment. And then Jay Corey is your third bout, which is the person you've referenced up until this point, I believe.
Jay Corey was that wasn't the title fight one. No, that was I remember that fight. That was a show that I did have one fight in there too before that was never recorded. It was like technically my first pro fight, and it was for King of the Ring was the organization. It was in Joliet, and it was at the Illinois Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union Hall.
Okay, so you're talking, I think that was R.D. Tadini?
Something like that. Yes, I think that was, I think that's right.
Did you get paid?
I had a couple. So Jacob Corey was a show that them and Fight Card did together.
Okay.
But then my first pro fight was never recorded on my record for some reason. And it was at that Electrical Workers Union Hall. It was like a cafeteria.
Did you get paid for it?
I got paid $400 and I was like, this is awesome. Like I could do this every weekend. $400 a week.
That's my rent.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, man, if I do this every weekend, man, I'll be making bank. Yeah. I got 200 to show, 200 to win.
You know what? You fought Cal Ferry for a title fight at Rumble in the Park. I think that was Dan Lardy's.
Yep. And that's the wrestler I was talking about that I lost Win State as a freshman.
So he came from Rockford kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. And if you look at his record, he's actually got a win over Ted Worthington, who has a win over Darren Elkins. So he's legit. That's like a legit opponent. This
kid, like I said, I watched him when I was a sophomore in high school. He was a freshman in high school winning the state championship, right? And he won it his freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. He got in trouble his senior year and wasn't allowed to wrestle at state. So he would have been a 4-time state champ. And then he went on to wrestle D1 at University of Illinois. So, he was a guy in high school, I kind of looked up. There were a bunch of wrestlers that I kind of looked up to, that I wanted to be because they were so good. He was one of them. So a funny story about that, how that whole fight came about was, do you remember the IFL?
Of course,
International
dude.
Fight League?
Yeah. I did a little work for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So they held tryouts here in Illinois, or one of their tryouts was here in Illinois. So I went there and tried out.
Where at?
And we did like a kickboxing round where they paired you up with a random dude and they put headgear.
Was this at the fire department that they did this at one of the firehouses?
It wasn't at a fire department. I think it was by Rosemont or some
Okay, so it's the Chicago Red Bears.
Yeah.
Do you know who the head coach was?
No, but who was that?
Igor Zinoviev.
Okay.
Does that mean anything to you?
No.
He got knocked out by Frank Shamrock in the UFC. I mean, that was kind of but he was also Jeffrey Epstein's bodyguard.
Oh my God. Yeah. Kind of glad they folded then and I didn't go on. Yeah, so that IFL tryout, it was super weird. We did a lot of just fighting, normal tryouts. You go and you'll do pad work. I tried out for the Ultimate Fighter. It was a rolling round and then a pad work round. this one was a live rolling round. They matched you up. Then you did a live sparring kickboxing. And then, like, if you impress them and you made it to the third round, it was MMA sparring. And they just gave us, we brought our own gloves. They threw headgear on us. No shin pads, nothing. They paired us up with someone random. And then you fought a 3-minute round in front of everybody. So they matched me up with Ferry at the tryout. And, like, we were fucking brawling, going back and forth. I was taking him down. He had me in, like, this guillotine that I almost went out in. And then, like, the round ended and everybody was watching us. So I think the promoter kind of, like, saw that and then ended up matching us up for a title fight because we were both coming up at the time. We were both undefeated. He was 9-0. I was only 2-0 as a pro. But, you know, we lied and added my 3 amateur fights on to say I was 5-0. And then they matched us up for that title fight in Rockford.
So were you ever considered for the IFL?
Yeah, I was approached by Pat Milich's team in Iowa. They were out of
the Silverbacks.
The Silverbacks. So they came up to me at the tryouts and they're like, "Hey, would you ever consider moving to Iowa?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." But then literally like a week after that, all the news came out that the IFL just went defunct. Like they closed down and they never had another show. So I don't know what the tryouts were for.
I think it was just another round of funding. Tim Kennedy was on the Chicago Red Bears as well.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, in fact, the director of operations is now in charge of Fight TV. Yeah, that's wild. So Ferry is your 1, 2, 3. It's your 4th fight, arguably a 4-time state champion. Did you have like a really brave manager, or were you booking your own fights? Because that is a lot to bite off at that point in your career.
It was I didn't really have a manager at that time. It was like Mac finding fights for me, and then Mac was talking with like some other guys who like manage people, and they'd help him out a little bit, but I was never signed with anybody really. And it was just one of those things where I was getting to a point in my career, like when this all started out, I thought it was going to be one amateur fight, get it out of my system and be done with it. Right. But then it started like snowballing, like one amateur fight turned into 2. Then I wanted to go pro. Then I wanted to fight for a belt. So it was getting to a point in my career. And also at that time, I was still coaching at Elmhurst, and I was actually looking to go back to school to get my master's degree. And I was offered a grad assistant position at a Division II school in like Missouri. So they would have paid for my schooling and all that. Right. So I was at like a crossroads at that point. And I remember that like that fight was kind of like the deciding factor for me, if I should chase this fight thing or if I should go back to school and get my master's degree.
You honestly couldn't pick a better fight to do that. Like if there's a fork in the road, that one's going to help you decide. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, what are you doing this for? You're just doing this to like fight on these, like that Joliet show that I told you about. I was fighting with guys that were outside with their hand wraps on, smoking fucking cigarettes before their fight. Right. And I'm like, is this what I'm doing this for, to fight with guys like this? Or am I doing this to get to the big show? You know? So if you're, you know, for these younger guys coming up, it's like shit or get off the pot, you know, don't waste your time fighting these nobodies. Like challenge yourself and fucking go for it, you know?
Yeah. I think you take that same approach with Ronnie Hauser, one of your current fighters, tough as nails.
Yeah.
Hasn't really had an easy fight yet, but you're figuring it out.
Yeah. And with him, we had to take a lot of chances because we turned him pro during the pandemic. So like there was nothing going on in the Midwest. So I was like searching forever. I didn't want him to sit for, you know, how it turned out to be like 2 years before shit started really opening back up. So I was like, we flew him down to Miami because Miami was one of the only places still doing shows. And we had to take a risk, and we had to put him up against a much more seasoned opponent. But he put on a hell of a show for that first fight, you know, and
he's a hell of a nail. He's a hell of a nail, and his pressure is insane. He's just got to find his groove. He'll be fine. Yeah. He's got to find his groove.
Yep.
So if you look at your career, you're at a fork in the road and you're saying, hey bro, this is either going to work out or it's not. Your next fight is against a guy that's 33-5, coached by one of the greatest developers of talent that has ever walked this planet, Jeremy Horn. You credit him for Militich Fighting Systems at their peak. And it's also I think it was in Colorado, right?
That's the Cripple Creek one that I was telling you about at 10,000 altitude.
Warriors collide July 19th, 2008. This guy's got 2 wins over Ali Bradstreet, another stud fighter. Like, he's as tough as it gets.
Yeah, and there's a story behind that one too. Like, he was a last minute replacement. I was supposed to fight Justin Salas, who ended up making it to the UFC. I don't think he did like too well, but he won some fights, I think. But anyways, it was like I was out in Colorado already because I went out 10 days early to acclimate. Then I get a call from the promoter, and he's like, hey, bad news. Justin Salas was riding a bike and got hit by a car. He's out of the fight. He can't fight. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I came all the way out here. I'm running every day in this altitude.
In debt? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that too. And so they were like, well, they ended up calling Birdsley because that dude was pretty nutty too, man. Just like talking to him and stuff. And he's one of those guys that would just fight anybody. And he'd fight like every weekend, which is why he had like almost 50 fights on his record or something.
He was on his way to his best imitation of Jeremy Horn. Jeremy's got about 150 fights. Right. This guy ended up with like 60 something. Like, he was doing his best. Yeah,
he was doing his best. So he was a late replacement, and I was like, I had like 5 fights, and I'm going up against a guy with 40 fights, and I was like, all right, let's do it. I'm not going to not fight. So that was the 10,000 foot altitude fight outdoors, and he was coming from Utah, so he was training at altitude.
He was already there.
I think he was okay, but it was another memorable, great fight, man. Gave me a lot of confidence, going up against a guy with that many wins and being able to beat him at altitude. I remember going into that second round and feeling like I was holding 10-pound weights in each hand because, like, just the lactic acid that was already building up in my shoulders and stuff was insane.
Gabriel Miranda is another late replacement. You beat him, knocked him out in 316. That was back in Colorado. At this time, you're also working out with Jeff Neal. You received your purple belt shortly after that.
Yeah, that was actually the first belt he ranked me as. So
no way.
Yeah. I was an All-American in college in wrestling. So I relied on that for probably from 2007 until late 2000s. For my first like 3-4 fights, I didn't train jiu-jitsu with anybody. I was just wrestling and striking. That's all I did. I learned a little bit of jiu-jitsu from like, some of the guys at the gym that like trained somewhere else or whatever. And they'd show me like how to do an arm bar. But for the most part, I kind of like taught myself from watching UFC fights from when I was a little kid. So like, I knew like I had a pretty good guillotine already. And like, I'd scramble and take people's backs and choke them. So I started going over to Jeff Neal's, and like, I just remember like not being belted, but I was like submitting these higher belted guys already, like blue belts, purple belts. So when we talked to Jeff about officially ranking me, he like, I remember the day that he was like observing me, how I was doing. So he was like matching me up with different guys in the gym and then just roll with them just to kind of get his bearings on how well I was. And, my first belt rank, I was ranked as a purple, which it takes a lot of people like 5 years to get to
5 consistent years without missing. You get a purple belt. I mean, that's a fast track purple.
Yeah.
I mean, some guys it's 7, 8, 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jeff Neal, like if you look at his ability to judge talent, Stephan Bonner was pretty much the architect behind Stephan Bonner, to get him to the UFC. And I remember after you started working out there, he'd call me up going, Lamas. And this is right at the time where Bonner was kind of at his peak. And Stephan had moved on, but he was just like, no, dude, you don't get it.
Yeah, Jeff, I love training with Jeff. I love training. At that time, he was at Overtime Wrestling Academy is when I first started training with him. So, it was the combination of Jeff, and then Sean Bourmet, the owner at Overtime, would come in and help teach some of the MMA stuff. And we do like this rotational thing. And it was kind of the first time where I got to go to one gym and like really focus on everything, because like Jeff had another guy named Herc who would like do mitt work with us and striking stuff.
Yeah, Herc is still in the game.
No, it wasn't Herc Hayes. It was a different Herc. So Herc Hayes is
who also does pad work, I might add. Herc Hayes.
Yeah, who also does. It was another great technician, does pad work. But this was a different guy. But we do like 30 minutes with Jeff, 30 minutes with Herc, 30 minutes with Bourmet. So like we do jiu-jitsu, striking, wrestling. And it was the first time that like I was able to do that all in one place, because before that I would have to travel to like 3 or 4 different gyms just to get everything in. And I really love training with Jeff. He's an awesome coach. And like, when you want to do stuff that works in a fight, you have to be good at fundamentals and basics and perfect all that. And that's what Jeff Neal is really good at. Like a lot of his stuff that he shows, I still use and teach myself to my jiu-jitsu students. Like his whole Kimura series, like I do that all the time and I teach it all the time. So he's got some really great stuff, and I'm really appreciative of the years that I had with him.
When people move on from coaches, people handle the separation of that relationship like many different ways. And sometimes you can lose respect for somebody by the way they handle a separation with either a gym or a coach. And when I called Jeff in regards to you leaving for Florida, he's like, Ricky Lamas called me himself, talked about it. I think that's a champion right there. He's like, the way he handles everything is straight up, direct. It's lots of sentiments, real feelings. Sometimes you got to do things to better yourself, but the guy never dodged me, never looked a different way. He's like, man, Ricky Lamas, anything that guy needs, he's going to get from me. That's Jeff Neal's explanation of you leaving him for a different camp.
Yeah, that was it was hard for me to do. And there's a lot behind that whole story of, Overtime and Jeff Neal. And I kind of felt like I was caught in the middle of like some big drama between them. And I had loyalties to both sides, and it was hard for me in that time. And kind of around that same time, we had gone out to Miami just randomly. I was in the WEC already. And we just, it was like October. I had a fight in November, and we were like, the weather starts to break in October here. That living in Chicago starts to get a little cold. And we're like, man, let's get out of the cold and go train on the beach for a week. So we went and ended up at MMA Masters just like kind of randomly. And I went there and got my ass whooped, got my ass whooped by Baboon, got my ass whooped by Daniel Valverde, my jiu-jitsu coach.
Wait, hold up. It's Luis Palomino, Baboon. If you guys, So if you guys look at, and he's been on here, we've had Baboon on as a guest already, but if you look at the totality of his independent grind, the guy's never fought in the UFC. He is the current BKFC 65 and 55 pound champion. If you look at his independent grind, he's got wins over Jorge Masvidal. Like, he's got about 7 or 8 UFC veterans on his record. He took too many fights and with too many risks, and maybe would lose one here and there, rather than just going, no, I'm going to wait for the big show to call me. But he is next level talent, big time.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that was right on that. Like, if he would have been in the UFC, he would have been a top contender at whatever weight he won at. He was one of these guys that, like you said, he took a lot of risks and he wasn't afraid to fight anybody. And he gave, if you go back in WSOF and watch his fights with Justin Gagey, who is, the BMF in the UFC right now, right?
Fought him twice.
And almost had him out in both fights in the first round. Had him, doing his stumbling dance all over the octagon. But, the guy toughed through and came out with the win. But, I mean, those were like fight of the year candidates, both of those.
Yeah. And he beat Jorge Masvidal in Miami.
In Miami. In Miami. I was there live for that fight. And I had just gotten there to do my first camp in Miami. And Baboon was fighting. And, I went to the Airlines Arena. It was at the Airlines Arena. And, watched him fight, and it was awesome. And then he was like right back in the gym after that and helping me train for my fight in the WEC coming up.
And let's kind of put this in a proper context. Everybody knows Jorge Masvidal is Mr. Miami. He runs the town. The guy like text messages Donald Trump. Like that's like what kind of sway Jorge Masvidal has in Miami. But Baboon at the time was one of the city's most popular barbers.
Yeah.
So you've got like the head barber versus kind of like the honorary mayor fighting each other. Like,
yeah, he tells me about those days. He used to cut hair at the flea market.
Yeah,
at the flea. Yeah, so like Baboon
kids for
Miami.
free. Dude, Baboon, like he would do this program where right before school he'd have a designated time and he'd give all the kids first day of school haircuts for free.
Yeah. He's, that's why me and him click so well. We both we're kind of cut from the same cloth, both humble, both hardworking. Like me and him, I found the perfect training partner in him when I went to Miami, because like he was super strong where I was trying to get strong, and I was super strong where he was trying to get strong. So like we'd go at it and we'd battle every day, and help each other get better, not just try and beat the shit out of each other, but actually help each other. So I was really fortunate to go by MMA Masters and find, my official home there.
So when you were working out at Overtime Fitness with Sean Bormet, who's coaching at Michigan right now,
yep,
legendary coach, like definitely putting up Hall of Fame numbers as a coach and a phenomenal wrestler. Rory Markham used to work there as well. Did you guys get any rounds in as well?
Not sparring, no. He did come by a little bit. Like Andre Arlovsky would also go by there and train with Bormet. So there were some big name people that would go, but they'd kind of do more like one-on-one stuff with them. And they'd kind of stay away from the aspect of it and kind of sparring around with a bunch of random guys. So they'd work a lot just one-on-one and learn their wrestling from Sean and John Kading and Kelly Bowman's that were over there, and work one-on-one with those guys.
Yeah, there was I was shocked that whatever issues took place, both parties. Jeff Neal's in a real good place right now. Bormet, obviously, over at Michigan, it was ahead of its time, and had things worked out, it'd be a travel gym today.
It for sure. I agree with that 100%. They had some really good stuff going on, but unfortunately, business wise, they just couldn't kind of work together, and that happens a lot. And I wish it would have grown into something, because like Chicago is one of these hubs where we have tons and tons of great talent and great fighters coming out of it, but there's no one like ATT of the Midwest, like down south.
Ricardo, I've got my thoughts on it. It's probably not going to be real popular to say in certain circles, but in essence, there's not a lot of pro shows here in Chicago. And those beginning pro fights are so important. And if you can't get them here and you've got talent like yourself, you have to leave.
Yeah.
So it's like picking the fruit before like it's ripe to eat. And because of that, it becomes a culture, a leaving culture. And, like I said, there's some glaring, obvious reasons why that's not happening. And until they're addressed, MMA in Chicago, in terms of producing high-end talent that stays, outside of Lewis Taylor, yourself, Bilal Muhammad, like it's going to be a very hard uphill battle.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Did you ever meet my former business partner, Viet Nguyen, over at Overtime Fitness?
Yeah. I knew Viet. I knew Viet well. Yeah.
Any stories behind that you'd like to share?
I mean,
go ahead.
I met Viet. I met Viet at Overtime. Was the first time that I met him. So, and then like he'd asked me to work with his kid a little bit. I held pads for his kid a little bit, because I started teaching at Overtime too when they had their whole MMA thing going on.
His kid is now doing MMA right now. He's also a former collegiate wrestler. Kid's a badass, like legit good kid. He's got excellent children.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. So But Viet would always come up to me and do like, the why. And I'm like, oh, this guy, I guess he's been training Muay Thai for a long time. And then I saw him hit pads for the first time and I was like, oh my God, like he looked like more beginner, terrible. And then he had this whole thing where like, were you part of that promotion that he did? Is that where you guys were kind of business partners?
No. So what happened is Jeff calls me up and he's like, dude, I got a guy here. He's got 3 million in cars, which he did. He legitimately did. Wants to get in the MMA game. He's like, I want to put you guys together. And I got a whiff of him. And like, I knew he was a scumbag, but I figured I'm in law enforcement at the time. I was actually on TV on a TV show called The Squeeze. So it was like people knew who I was and what I did. So I figured, even if this guy's a little bit slippery, he's probably not going to go down that road with me. He started using steroids, and it was like I saw an office full of maybe 30, 40 six-figure people dwindle down to about 10 six-figure people within about 4 months of him using juice. It was whatever wires that crossed in his head were because of steroids it was just mind-boggling. It was mind-boggling.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. A lot of shady stuff went on with Viet and the businesses that he was involved in. And I'm glad that I was kind of approached about the gyms that he was going to open up and, from Jeff, unfortunately Jeff got involved with him a little bit, but then finally distanced himself. And I'm glad I was just like, no, I'm going to Miami. I'm doing my own thing, guys. Good luck with everything, but I'm out.
So Viet would fund the shows just so people can kind of rep, and we're going to move on. He would fund different businesses, and then like I would hear from people in the office, no, he makes something that anybody will want at a decent price, and then he would refer to as spanking their credit cards by running their credit cards through dozens of other businesses that he would open up under other people's names that would funnel into his bank account. Right. And like I remember talking to him about it, going, hey, dude, this is what I'm hearing. Like, if that ever pops up with me, there's going to be some issues. Needless to say, he did it to me one time. He caught a federal case, 8.5 years in prison. That's how much time he did. And the guy probably stole $6 or $7 million doing that. Like legit stole that much. Moving forward, Ironheart Crown, your last local fight, Chris Martin. I was at this fight of yours as well. Completely empty arena, and you had fight of the night.
Yeah, it was that was a cool fight. That was actually so my knee was banged up for that fight. I tried out for the Ultimate Fighter. I popped my LCL in the jiu-jitsu round, and so I wasn't even 100%. And Chris Martins was a tough guy. Remember, he was in my face the whole fight, being really vocal and stuff. It was the first time I kind of fought someone like that was like trying to talk shit to me in the fight. So that threw me off a little bit, but he was tough, and we put on a good show for everybody. I think the sound went out for a second.
Absolutely fight of the night. I mean, it was fantastic performance. Rich Crunkleton is fighting Bart Palazewski at WEC 39. Bart Palazewski would also go over to overtime. Yeah. When Crunkleton falls off, with huge confidence, you step into that fight. Did you and Bart spar prior to this at any point?
No, so we were in the same practice room a few times, but we never actually went with each other. And it's funny that you bring that up because I didn't accept the fight. Mac accepted that fight for me. So I was at the time I was training for a fight in Atlanta, Georgia. I was still working at the Park District. So I'd go train my clients at the Park District, go home, take a nap, and then go to the gym and train. This was in my I wake up from my nap after work in the morning, and my phone has 10 or 12 missed calls and a voicemail from Max saying yo, call me back right now, hurry. So I call him back, and he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, no, I'm sleeping. I'm going to come into the gym in a little bit. And he's like, bro, get to the gym. We're fighting on Saturday. I'll go, what? I'm like, what the hell you mean we're fighting on Saturday? He's like, yeah, WEC. We're fighting Bart Palazewski in the co-main event. And I thought he was messing with me because Mac liked to, do stuff like that sometimes. But no, it was true. This was a Tuesday, and the fight was Saturday. So I go to the gym.
Well,
and I had to
where were you weight wise?
weight wise, I was probably about 168. It's really weird. When I fought at 155, I walked around lighter than when I fought at 145 because I was lifting a lot more. So I was like a lot leaner, and I was actually like, my weight wasn't that bad. So that's why like I made the cut to 45, because the cut to 55 wasn't really anything for me. But we accepted that fight. So then like I'm rushing.
Okay.
I'm rushing and I got to deal with medicals. I got to deal with going to get all this stuff done, get my weight down. And then like Bart's team was trying to not make the fight happen. So like they were in contact with like Sean Shelby, and they were like, no, we can't do this fight because they fight on the same team. These guys are both from the same team, because we both went to overtime. And we're like, so we had to call back and explain like, no, we're not on the same team. We happened to go to one gym at the same time. I've never trained with him. I've never sparred with him. So we eventually got the fight to stick, and flew out like the next day for Corpus Christi, Texas, and ended up fighting a couple of days later.
So Bart Pelishevsky, absolute stud. He's 32-11. Did you have a lot of confidence going into this fight with Bart as an opponent? Because Bart's pretty fucking tough.
Yeah, he's tough. And like I said, like I tried out for the IFL, and I knew Bart from watching him in the IFL. Like he had some great fights with God, what was the other kid's name? Chris something. He made it to the WEC also.
You talking about Sinisovic?
No. I forget the last name. I'll have to come back to it, but it was like a Polish sounding last name or something like that.
Okay. It's Mike Sinisovic, so it wasn't definitely Chris. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so like I watched him, right? But as I was like gearing up to get my whole MMA career started. So I think it was a blessing that it happened on short notice, because I didn't have so much time to think about it, right? I was like thrown in there. As soon as we land in Corpus Christi, I'm doing all this new stuff that I've never done before, like signing posters and fucking interviews and, all this stuff, that it didn't really give me a chance to think about it too much. I just kind of enjoyed the moment, like finally being able to walk out into an arena, like a packed arena, instead of, the electrical workers hall in a cafeteria in Joliet, Illinois, where I had to warm up in the crowd because they didn't have a warm up room for us. Yeah. So I was really just kind of relishing that moment, like the whole walkout and everything. I remember that, but I was super nervous. I was super nervous for every fight, man. Even like wrestling matches, I get nervous for. But I think if a fighter tells you that they're not nervous, they're lying. Nerves can work to your advantage if you know how to control them,
All right, so I agree. And it's weird because you guys were real confident riding into that fight. And if you look at Rich Crunkleton and his style, Crunkleton and another absolute stud, we had him on about a year ago. You guys have a similar style in theory.
Right.
Like in
both
theory,
grapplers.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to train the same for him as he would you.
Right.
I'm surprised they were so apprehensive at that. Maybe they just wanted a new opponent. Maybe it was just kind of shuffle the deck again, get us somebody else.
Yeah, and I was kind of apprehensive in the fight myself. Like you can kind of see it in the beginning rounds until I kind of got comfortable and started taking him down. But I remember Sean Shelby coming up to me after that fight and telling me to like open up a little more. So I was definitely nervous, confident but nervous, and just trying to get to my game in that fight. I just remember just like latching on to him and holding on for dear life when I take him down, and but it was good, man. It was a good fight. It was a great experience, and it was one of those risky opportunities that you have to take because it's that's how you get your foot in the door a lot of these times.
You know what though? But if you look at that fight, combined with the other two, you've got about 100 victories on one side and under 20 losses combined. Actually, probably under 15 losses combined on the other side.
Yeah. It was like I said, like coming up, it's not like a lot of these fights and this path that I chose was planned. It was kind of all fate, and it worked out really well because these fights, these last minute replacements, these guys that have like 40 fights on their record, it all gave me a lot of confidence and made me believe that I was doing the right thing and that I deserved to be here, and that I could fight with anyone in the world.
It had to have been. I mean, you literally, your last 3 opponents have got 70, 75 wins with, 16 losses. That's
Yeah.
like, king of kings. I mean, you're talking just based on that level right there. You're like, man, this guy's going to be in the main event one day. It's just when making it happen.
Yeah.
With Danny Castillo, right around this time, you started, I noticed like sometimes people are superstitious prior to events, or they kind of have their routine and they don't like getting out of it. You start carrying a rosary with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so after the Castillo fight, that was my first loss in my career. And kind of took that pretty hard. I was kind of down on myself for a while. Later I fought Castillo, I think it was like August 9th, something
August
like
9th, 2009. Yeah. And Danny Castillo, so everybody kind of understands the context, one of the coaches over at Team Alpha Male, also one of the main, I think when Dwayne Ludwig was on The Ultimate Fighter, he was on Team Faber. Yep. It was, kind of contentious. Danny Castillo is the real deal.
Yeah. Yeah, he was good. He was really good, man. We put on a good scrap too until he caught me with a big right hand, and that's just how it goes. But so that was August 9th. I remember, your first loss in your career, that one, it kind of sticks with you because I had been fighting for a couple of years already, hadn't lost once. So I was feeling down on myself, and then later on that month, on August 28th, we got a phone call that my brother, who was living in Phoenix, Arizona, had passed away suddenly. That threw life into perspective for me, and me, my dad, and 2 of my brothers went out to Arizona to gather his stuff and bring it back. And when we were out there, we were kind of walking around town with a cousin of mine who lived in Arizona also. So when we went out there, we kind of met up with him a few times, and we were walking around the town in these little shops. And I saw this, we're in like a shop that was like, they had like a lot of like Native American stuff, whatever. But then they had this little setup, and there were a bunch of these wooden rosaries that were on there. And when we went to my brother's apartment, he had this big wooden rosary hanging over his fireplace. And so like I went up, I grabbed like 8 rosaries, bought them. And at my brother's wake, I had the priest bless them. And then I laid one in the coffin with my brother, gave one to my other brothers. There's 6 of us total, right? So there were, besides my brother George, who passed away, there were 4 others. So I gave all them one. I gave one to my dad, and then I kept one for myself. And I'd wear it to every weigh-in. I wear it to every walkout and the fight after that, just kind of bringing him with me. Because actually, if it wasn't for that brother, I wouldn't have met Mac, and who knows where I would have been in my MMA career, because I told you back when I was working at the Park District, I applied for a job there and was like denied. And then I was like, my brother was a amateur bodybuilder, so I'd work out with him a lot. And we were like working out one day, and I was like, yeah, I really wanted to work at the Park District by my house, but I didn't get the job. And he's like, at the Oakbrook Park District? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I know the manager there, Joan Idea, because my brother, like I said, he was an amateur bodybuilder, and then he started like he do a lot of side hustles, and one of his side hustles was selling Tanita scales to gyms where it like measures your body composition and your body fat. Yeah. So he had sold one to Joan Idea, my old boss. So he's like, let's ride over there right now and go talk to him. So we go over there, and within like 5 minutes of my brother going in and talking to him, I had a job at the fitness center. So, and like that's where I met Mac, and that's so he was an important role in my whole MMA career, man, because he got me in touch with my first coaches, and so that that rosary was just kind of my way of bringing him with me to my fights.
I think that's fantastic. And if you look at your early career, taking those really hard early fights, and more than prepared you with a 33-11 Bart Pelzewski, 7-1, a California 7-1, Danny Castillo, with lots of accolades, and then James Krause is 10-1, your next opponent. Like, you're not even in the UFC and you got a murderer's row. This is like high-end UFC talent that they're putting you in against.
Yeah, the WEC was no joke back in those days. I know that I was at 155, and I think at the time, I think it was about 2005 where they reintroduced 155 to the UFC, but that was the lightest weight class that they offered. And they didn't have like a huge roster for 155. So all these lighter guys like had nowhere to go for a big show. It was the WEC. So making it to the WEC was just as good as making it to the UFC, in my opinion, back in those days, because like these were the best guys in the world at the lighter weight classes.
Dude, absolutely. James Krause, Glory MMA, obviously he's got some scrutiny that he's dealing with right now. It's a shame, but he's a brilliant MMA mind. Like if I was an up-and-comer with a lot of talent right now, I would 100% be going to James Krause. I mean, you'd get his undivided attention, and he's got a brilliant combat sports mind. After James Krause, you're decisioning people, and you got to find you got to open up. Sean Shelby says you got to open up.
Yeah.
Bendy Casimir out of Drysdale's Jiu-Jitsu. Bendy Casimir is 25-2. He's out of Las Vegas, a transplant over in Las Vegas. Tons of hype behind him at one of the greatest jiu-jitsu gyms available in this entire country.
Yeah. Hearing about him, I think he was like a big deal over in Europe and then came over to the United States. And that was my first camp in Miami, my first official camp. So I went out there with Mike Santiago when he was like 18 years old. He drove down to Miami with me. He stayed at my family's place and watched my dog while I flew out to go fight in Ohio, and then helped me drive back and all that. So I remember that flying knee that I hit in that fight. We would drill that for warm-up every single day in practice. And Baboon was actually leading the practices because Cesar Carneiro, who was our main MMA coach, was in Brazil for that month. So I didn't even train with our main MMA coach my first camp at MMA Masters. It was like Baboon was the coach. So like every fight practice, every pro practice, Baboon would kind of run it. So I'd do that, and then I'd train with Daniel in the evenings and stuff for my jiu-jitsu. But I remember that skip knee, we would just drill it every single day, and practice makes perfect, man, because it came out in that fight and sent his mouthpiece flying like a punt in a field goal.
So at one point you're celebrating, and then kind of like it becomes scary because Bendy's just not recovering.
Yeah. It was first knockout. My adrenaline got a hold of me, and I was.
You're so. Yeah, I mean, the highlight reel. Hey, dude, put that one on YouTube today. I mean,
I know. It was even like that there was a punch that came after the knee as I was coming down that I couldn't stop, dude. It was just like killer instinct. The adrenaline takes over. Like so many people are like, "Oh, it was so uncalled for." It's like, you get in there, right, and have like the highest adrenaline you'll ever feel during the fight, and then knock somebody out and see if you could stop yourself from doing something. Like it's kill or be killed when you're in there, and a lot of these people don't realize that unless you've had hundreds of fights or like so many fights where you just like it's like eating a ham sandwich for you going into the octagon to fight another pro fighter that wants to hurt you. You're not going to be able to control those emotions very well. No. So it was just one of those things, man. But luckily he was okay.
Yeah, mid-air, you should have, changed your mind.
Right. As I'm coming down, like, this isn't a good idea.
So Bendy, man, bro, it was a scary knockout. But dude, man, sometimes you need to make a career change, and that a fight like that would definitely make that happen for you.
Yeah, it was a huge confidence boost and like really solidified the decision to go train in Miami. I was like, this is the type of fighter I want to be. This is what I've been looking for. This is already making me more well-rounded. And so from then on out, I just made it a habit to go out to Miami for every camp.
Oh, well, it definitely leveled you up because you're finding a finish. And that's so important. Like if you've got 11 fights, 11 decisions, the UFC is not, they're not going to sign you. And you're finding your finish. And Dave Jansen, state champion out of Oregon, one of Team Quest's hottest prospects. He's 11-1. Dude, you're literally fighting a murderer's row here.
Yeah. You know, I feel like my whole career, they were just throwing people at me. I don't know if they wanted to get me out of there or what, but like, everyone that I fought was tough, man. And I don't know if it's just maybe you get to that level and there are no easy fights, but I feel like a lot of my career, I was the underdog going into a lot of these fights and came out as the winner.
Yeah. I mean, Dave Jansen, I mean, you win a decision. Your shorts were like crimson red. Do you still own those?
I do. I could probably go grab them right now and show them to you. They still got his DNA all over them. They were white shorts and they were pink after the fight.
Is it in a frame or no?
It was, and then I never put the frame up, so it got really dingy. Well, actually, it might be in a frame. I'm not sure. I might have taken it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did put it in a frame, but just didn't have anywhere to hang it. And I think I took it out and put them. I have a lot of my like fight kits in like jewel bags and stuff, like hidden away in drawers. So I got to see how I get those up somewhere.
Iuri Alcantara, your second loss.
Yeah.
What happened, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I shouldn't have fought. I think I was fighting with a concussion in that fight. When I was out in Miami training, I suffered a knockout in like a sparring session. It was just one of those things that happened. It was bad. I went out cold. And this was like less than a month before the fight. And, you know, when that happened, it's actually, you know, I don't like making excuses for my fights, but the same thing happened before my Castillo fight. It wasn't during a sparring session though. I was holding pads for someone.
I heard that. Yeah, holding. You caught a head kick.
I was holding pads for someone and like I lost focus for a second. I kind of turned, I think, to talk to somebody, and this guy completely missed the pad and kicked me right on my jaw and knocked me out. And then the sparring session, it was just one of those things. It was with the dude. I had put him to his knees about 3 times before this knockout happened, just from like body shots, just toying with him. Right. And then this guy like ends up, you know, and I'm dancing around. He ends up throwing a kick. I dipped the wrong way on the kick and got caught with it like right on the tip of my chin and just went out. And I think both of those fights I probably shouldn't have fought if I had somebody kind of looking out for me. Because it's not a good idea, you know. In the UFC, if you suffer a TKO or a knockout, you're on like a no contact for like 60 days. Like the commission will tell you, like the doctors, at least 30 to 60, something like that. I was never one to kind of pull out a fight, so I thought I could tough through it, but I don't think in retrospect it was a good idea, because once you unlock that, until you give your brain time to heal, you get touched again and you're going to go out pretty easy.
Yeah, it's like a bruise. You can't see it. You want to push yourself. And in essence, what you're doing is you didn't get knocked out twice. You got knocked out 4 times from really 2 instances.
Yeah. Yep. So it's tough, man, you know, but it's life lessons learned hard, I guess.
You know what's crazy? Like even like your beginning UFC run, Matt Grice, you cut to 45. What was the decision-making process for that?
It was just the fact that I was going to be in the UFC, which was like my childhood dream. And I didn't feel like I was disciplined enough. Like I said, like the cut to 55, I'd kind of eat clean during the week, like up until Thursday. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday after training, like me and Baboon would go out to like buffets, like steak buffets and stuff, and just eat like assholes and, you know, that. And then I'd lose again I'd lose all that weight again during the week. And the cut to 55 was just too easy in my mind to compete at a high level in the UFC. I don't know if it was the right decision, but I just felt like I could be more disciplined and get my weight down. So I decided to take the time and do it.
Where'd you wrestle at in college?
I wrestled at Elmhurst College, and
No,
all
no,
4 years
wait.
I wrestled 157, and that was
I mean, think about
that was
that.
when we only had an hour between weigh-in and competition.
Okay.
Right. So I was like, I have 24 hours now. Why not try to make the drop to 45, rehydrate, and feel better? So that was a factor too going into my weight cut.
Well, Mac Rice, you win by knockout head kick. You wind up with, Cub Swanson, another Hall of Famer. He's 15-4 at the time. You win with an arm triangle. Like, you're on top of the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a special fight too. Actually, I'll turn this right here. That's from my Swanson fight. My mom
That's awesome.
made that for me. Little thing there. Yeah. And the cancer ribbon in my hair was because 1 week before that fight, my grandma had just passed away from cancer. So that was a fight that I was thinking about not even fighting because like when we contacted the UFC, they were like saying, okay, just let us know if you want to pull out of this fight, sorry for your loss, all that. But they let me stay and attend all the services. And then I flew out the night before the weigh-in. Instead of the normal like Tuesday before, I flew out like Thursday. So I literally went from the cemetery. I went to the airport, landed in California, and then hopped off and went to go cut weight. Like it was.
I'll tell you what. This might sound heartless, but the UFC generally does not allow that. Like, no, you're one of our athletes. You're here on Tuesday. You're in a hotel and you're sequestered.
Right. Yeah. So we let them know, like, hey, I wanted to attend the services. My grandma just passed away, and they're just like, all right, just make sure you're here, right afterwards. So I was like, I was lucky.
You swear you'll be here.
Yeah.
Well, hell of a win. Another Hall of Famer. You're checking a lot of boxes. I'll get to these. Hatsu Hioki. You win by decision. He's 11-2. I know you went into that fight with a rib injury. And Eric Koch, who I think he's got he's got about 25 fights in the UFC. Eric Koch out of Iowa, super stud from Rufus Sport.
Yeah.
You finish him in the second round.
Yeah.
And then you refuse to fight because you deserve a title shot.
Well, no, not almost, yeah. But actually, I called for the title shot after the Coke fight,
which made sense.
Yeah, because he was actually scheduled to fight Aldo for the title, and then some injury happened, and then they fed him to me. I think Aldo got injured or something. Somebody had to pull out of that fight. But then, actually, after that, they didn't give me the title fight. I said, okay, give me someone now who, if I beat, I get a title shot. So then they set me up with the Korean Zombie the first time.
Well, the Korean Zombie also publicly stated you will be his easiest fight.
Yeah. Well, he pulled out of 2 fights that I was supposed to fight him against. So,
yeah.
I couldn't blame him because the first one was, I think, I don't know who Aldo was supposed to fight. They got injured. So that title fight was off. So they pulled the Korean Zombie from my fight. I got a phone call from Dana White when I was in Miami training to fight the Korean Zombie. And we were only a couple out fight. And he's like, I'm really sorry. Korean Zombie's going to fight for the title. They threw some money at me, which I didn't mind. But I was like, okay, but, I want the next line. I want the next shot. Dana couldn't promise it to me then, but that's when I held out after that. I said, listen, I've been a company man this whole time, but I deserve this title shot. So I'm sitting until you guys give it to me.
All right. Now that in the UFC's ear is a threat. And they don't like that. They don't like that at all.
There were a couple times in my career where what I did probably wouldn't have flown with any other fighter, but there was well, we'll get into it later. Later.
Yeah. So anyway, what they do is they say, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure. You sit for about a year, and what happens is Andre Pederneiras, Jose Aldo's coach publicly states, Ricky Lamas deserves to fight my student, Jose Aldo. And it wasn't because they thought it was an easy fight. It was just, hey, this guy's got a legacy. He's got a 10-year winning streak. He wants to fight the best. The only way to do that is to do the right thing. Like, you had the opponent's coach publicly going to bat for you. How frustrating was this moment in your career?
It was pretty frustrating. It was, you know, when I look back on it, they didn't even contact me to say, hey, we're going to give you the title fight. I just remember getting a phone call, or I just remember it showing up. The bout agreement just showed up in my email one day. It was like October or something. And like, there was no call, no nothing. They just sent the bout agreement. And I like remember calling my brother because he was helping manage me at the time. And I was like, is this like legit? So like, he had to get on the phone with Sean Shelby, and they like, you know, confirmed it. And so I signed it, and on we went.
Dude, that speaks volume. Like, dude, world title fight.
Yeah.
Like, that's worthy of a phone call.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Where do you think the push, I mean, you came from? You're finishing people.
Yeah.
Where do you think it came from?
I think they were running out of contenders for Jose Aldo to fight. I think they regretted.
Why were they doing that to you?
I don't know. I think because I just wasn't one of these loudmouth fighters that was just, you know, talking trash. And yeah, I like to talk in my fights, you know, and I don't think I was a boring fighter. I was getting finishes. No. I had the second most finishes in the featherweight division in history, you know, when I retired. I just think it was just, I don't know, man. You know,
did you get along with Sean Shelby?
What's that?
Did you get along with Sean Shelby, the matchmaker?
I mean, I got along with him okay. Like, I never gotten in any arguments or anything like that. I don't know if I was one of his favorite fighters. You know, it's very political. You know, they promote who they like, you know, and if you're friends with them, you'll probably get promoted a lot more than if you're not. I didn't come from a big gym. I was always the only one on my teams that was in the UFC. Whenever I got sent out to places, I was by myself. You know, I didn't have
dude, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Like if you look at UFC cards, you'll have 3-4 guys from AKA, 3-4 guys from ATT, and you know, 3-4 guys from Colorado. They kind of one-shot stop in terms when it comes to matchmaking. Wow.
Yeah. It was really awkward, dude. Like we'd be sent to like Vegas on these fighter summits and stuff, and like all the fighters on the roster to go, right? And like I'm like sitting there, and everybody's like with their cliques, you know, all the teams are together, and I'm sitting there like by my damn self every single time. I'm like, well, hey, you know, just like walking around alone and doing whatever alone. Didn't have an entourage with me. Everybody else had like this huge entourage, and I'm just by myself all the time. So maybe that kind of hurt my career a little bit too. I don't know.
Your career really wasn't that hurt. You know, I mean, you got the stuff, I mean, the spots, but like you earned it. There was no favors given. Right. You earned it. Did you ever think about leaving to go to some of the other bigger camps?
Not really. You know, earlier in my career, it did kind of like cross my mind to maybe I was a huge Uriah Faber fan. Like I said, you know, when I was coming up on the local scene, I was really into watching the WEC and the Tap Out show and all that. Like I watched all those shows. And Faber at that time, he was the face of the WC, and I really liked his style because even though he was a wrestler, he was really well-rounded, and he was like the fighter that I kind of wanted to be like. You know, I wanted to be a well-rounded fighter. He was a good wrestler that had good striking and all that. So I like thought about maybe going out to California and training at Alpha Male, but Miami just came first, and I felt really comfortable there at the gym, and you know, like I said, was very fortunate to have a training partner like Palomino.
Dude, Palomino, he's so underappreciated.
Yeah,
he really is. And you know, let's open up about Palomino a little bit. Let me have it right here. On January 18th, 2014, Luis Palomino, he has a pretty big fight. Do you remember it?
January 18th. Was that
Jorge Patino, Macaco.
Yeah, Macaco. And yeah, I remember that.
Huge fight for World Series of Fighting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was in his corner for that one.
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
Now, let's make it come full circle.
Right.
In my opinion, the biggest win in your career, which there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
You beat Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
His
Macaco
coach is his coach. So you help Palomino beat Macaco. Palomino helps you beat Oliveira.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird how stuff works out like that. That's that was, man, that was it seems like there's drama behind every fight that I'm in, you know, like the whole Charles Oliveira fight where he came in almost missing weight for the next weight class above the one we were supposed to fight at. And that fight almost didn't even happen. I remember I weighed in and then I was like eating breakfast in the lobby of the hotel because we got to weigh in early. So I was always one of the first ones down there because I was like, I made weight the night before I'd go to sleep. I'd wake up, try to be the first one on the scale. And so I'm like having some breakfast with like my dad and other people that came down there to Mexico to watch me fight. And Reed Harris strolls over to our table and sits down. And I'm just like, oh, this isn't good. Like I could just tell by the look on his face.
Reed Harris, former WEC guy. So
president.
Like, you guys know each other.
Yeah. We knew each other from the WEC. So
yeah,
he came down and I just tell by the look on his face. He's like, yeah, I got some bad news. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, what happened? And he's like, Charles Oliveira missed weight by 9 pounds. It doesn't look like the commission is going to let the fight happen. And then I was just like completely lost my appetite, even though I hadn't eaten anything in like 4 days. And I was like, no, dude, I was like, come on, we got to make this fight happen. And just like talking about it, he's like, well, maybe if I go back and tell him you're okay with it and you take the fight, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yes, tell him. Like, I didn't come all the way to Mexico to not fight.
And family traveled there. Like your mom is from Mexico. Like her family's there.
Yes. Yeah. I met family there that
you never met before.
For like the first time that I never met before. Yeah. You know, and I'm sitting there with my dad who like took the time. And my dad, it was a bitch for him to travel because of his visa. You know, like we talked about my dad coming to the U.S., he kept his Cuban citizenship his whole life because he's, you know, that's something that he never wanted to give up. Right. Proud Cuban. So he never became an American citizen. So to travel outside of the country was a big deal for him. Like he had to get a visa to be able to be allowed back in. So I remember him doing a bunch of work to get that, to go out to Mexico to watch me fight. It's like, we're fighting. Like, that's it. So luckily, he went back and talked to the commission, and they were able to make the fight happen because they put like a cap on Oliveira's weight for the following day to come in, which was right around the same weight that I came in. So that's how we were able to make that fight happen.
Wait, hold up. 9 pound miss.
9 pound miss.
Okay, just so people at home can kind of understand. Obviously, I mean, 9 pounds is ridiculous, but if you miss by 3 pounds. The person that misses by 3 pounds has a 95% chance of winning. All you got to do is just look at the numbers. Like I was just at the ABC convention talking to Ali, and I'm like, dude, 3 pounds, 95% of those people that miss by 3 pounds win their fight.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a future world champion that missed by 9 with a hell of a guillotine.
Yeah. Yeah, hell of an anaconda. Yeah, he weighed in at 155 pounds. And he was supposed to be 146. I remember.
What was the excuse?
I have no idea, dude. I don't even know what he was doing all week. Like I saw him in the sauna the first night I got to Mexico. We were in the sauna cutting weight together, and I'm like, why was he even in there? He missed by 9 pounds, dude. You know what I mean? He had to be like 30 pounds overweight by then or something, or at least 20. You know, but I don't know. And it's not like he came out on a week's notice. That fight came about because I was supposed to fight BJ Penn in the Philippines in October. Right. And then my last day of camp in Miami, when I'm actually packing my car up to drive home from Florida, I get a call from the UFC saying that the entire event in Manila has been canceled. So I was supposed to be main event in Manila against BJ Penn. Whole card's canceled now because BJ Penn got a rib injury. So then they're like, we'll work on something for you. And so they come back with a fight about a month later in Mexico against Charles Oliveira. So he had a good month. Like, it wasn't like a 2-week notice fight that he took.
Well, and dude, think about this. How far above your weight class do you really get when you're on a UFC roster?
Right.
You're always within striking distance. It's not like, well, I need 3 months to get ready. No.
Right.
You're in striking distance.
Yeah. So
any excuses from the camp? Any apologies?
No excuses that I heard of. No apologies either. But Charles Oliveira, he's a very respectful guy. I'm sure he was sorry that he missed weight. I don't think he did it like purposely or anything.
Man, 9 pounds, dude. You're really being lenient. You're being a nice guy right now. What kind of purse exchange? Did they give you 50% of his purse?
No, I think I got 30. I think I got 30% of his purse.
Bullshit.
They wouldn't do any. I think we asked for more, but they wouldn't. So we got 30%, and then they capped his weight at 165 pounds. So when he got to the venue, he had to weigh 165 pounds, and then he what he did? He made it, but he went for like the first fight on the card. So he went with like the first fighters on the card, which was like way earlier in the day. He could weigh in and then probably hydrate up for a few more hours before our fight.
Alex Davis is his coach.
We're early, made the weight, I guess.
Yeah, Alex Davis is his coach.
Yeah.
And that's a cool fucking dude, man. Like, Alex is just old school Marco Ruas buddy from Brazil type guy. One of our early interviews, phenomenal human being. He's pretty hard on stuff like that too. Like, that's shocking. Yeah. I wonder what the story is behind that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, either way, you finished him.
Yeah, got him with a guillotine. I had to weather the storm in that first round. Towards the end of the first round, he was putting it on. But Charles is like that. I feel like you have to weather his storm, and then he kind of like mentally backs up a little bit in the fight.
Dude, you're fighting absolute murderers, man, including Jose Aldo.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna do something, do it.
Yeah, February 1st, 2014. You were supposed to fight the Korean Zombie prior to that. They pulled him to fight at Aldo, and he's got a 9-year winning streak. He's 23-1, and there's statues of human beings that have been built that have accomplished less than Jose Aldo at this very time in his life.
Yeah, it was a very surreal moment. You see guys, me and Aldo were together. I saw him become a champion in the WEC, and we were at different weight classes. So I was like, man, this guy's a murderer. He's another guy that obviously you admire coming up, just because he was so good. He was so dominant, just dominating everybody. And like, I watch him fight all the time, and I'd watch, when he'd have his head down, like, across the ring and doing his shoulder shimmies and stuff. And then it's like flash forward, and it's me that he's standing across the octagon from, doing the exact same thing. So it was a super strange feeling to be in there, standing across the cage from him.
But dude, you've stepped up every single time. Do you think the moment you may have gotten caught up in it?
For sure. Yeah. I just feel like there was so much riding on the line that I was afraid to open up and make a mistake in that fight. Right. I was being too tentative because I didn't want to get caught with something stupid, because this was my chance. But then the funny thing is like, don't open up, and then you lose the opportunity to fulfill that dream that you have. Lesson learned. And it was a tough pill to swallow, but man, I feel like if I would have had one more minute in that fight, I maybe could have gotten the job done, because I ended the fight on top, and I was giving them hell in ground and pound. And when I get on top of somebody, most of the time they don't get up.
No, and like Jose Aldo, if you look at his career, the only time he ever lost rounds was the championship rounds. Like, he'd hit a cardio wall, and that was kind of your strength.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild, dude. I mean, dude, you main evented world title fight. Not many people like walking this planet can honestly say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy with my career, and obviously I wish that I feel like looking back, some of these other guys that are still in it, some of these guys that I've beat, I just wish I had more to show for what I did in the UFC, and maybe I'm being a little greedy, but I don't know. I see some of these guys that are like, Cub Swanson's in the Hall of Fame. I beat Cub Swanson. Oliveria went on to be a world champ. I see some other guys that I kind of came up with in the WEC who are making millions in the UFC now, and but maybe I should just shut up and be happy with what I did.
It's pretty impressive. I'm going to be honest with you. It's pretty impressive, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Let me throw some names at you, man. Some names that you probably hadn't heard in a while. Matt Kushart.
Matt Kushart.
Over at, I think you used to work out with him at Jeff Neal, with Jeff Neal.
Oh, Matt, what was the last name?
Kushart.
Kushart. Okay.
No? Okay. I'm going to edit that.
Maybe you're mispronouncing the last name.
Kuschart.
Well, no, Matt Kushart is my business partner. Kushart.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Matt Kushart's my business partner. Yeah.
There we go. Not too, we're going to use the R word there. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's my business partner at the gym, man. He's like a brother of mine. That's why I was like, a name I haven't heard in a while. Matt Kushart. I heard that name like yesterday.
Let me get you another one. Hey, dude, that was a bad setup. All right. Let's not. Phenomenal interview up until this point.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Giovanni Moljo.
Yeah, Gio. Yeah. Gio, I think he's in China right now. Like, that dude disappeared. I haven't talked to him in years, but he came from Miami and then kind of moved it to Illinois and started training at Top Notch. And yeah,
he was a hard, when he fought Miguel Torres for me.
Yeah,
he was one of the more difficult people to deal with in regards to getting his stuff in, contract, showing up to weigh-ins. I don't know if that was just like the game he was playing.
No, that was Gio. That was just Gio.
It took years off of my life. It took years off of my life. Yeah. Like
that dude is one of a kind, man. Like, very, very strange guy, but he's still a good guy. Very loyal kid. And I think he's actually doing some good stuff with his fight career now in China or something.
Yeah, I think he's teaching out there. Tommy Rojas, old school cat.
Tommy Rojas, yeah, he was one of the first guys that kind of helped Mac
sponsors and
find
stuff.
Fights for me and stuff.
Yeah, sponsors, fights. He did anything he could to help you out in your beginning of your career, man. Hey, dude, guys like that, it's the cement that hold the bricks together.
Right.
Like they're underappreciated and, man, phenomenal person. Steve Marianetti, your old wrestling coach, one-time national champ, 3-time All-American.
Yeah. He was pretty much, there are two people that I talked to when I talked about that fork in the road that I was at with going back to school or chasing my dream of fighting. And that was my dad and Steve Marianetti. And my dad, being the old school Cuban that he is, was looking for education, which was the safe bet at the time. So he just wanted me to kind of do that. And then I went and talked to Steve because I kind of, I looked up to him like a big brother, father figure type too. And he was, he really put it in a clear way for me. And he was like, because he was a competitor too. And he said, one of these things you can go back to, the other you cannot, right? Like school, you can always go back to school. But as far as with an athletic career and wanting to be a pro athlete, you have a very small window to do that in your life. So if you're going to do it, it's got to be done now.
Dude, I've never heard advice like that, and he couldn't be more correct.
Yeah. So after I talked to him, I called up that division school in Missouri, and I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to turn down the offer. I'm gonna try to fight full time." So Steve was was a big deciding factor in that. He helped me out a lot in my career as a wrestler, you know, in college and post.
What are we closing with? Who do you want to thank? What stands out? I mean, I've held you hostage here for almost 2 hours.
No, it's all good. I think, you know, a lot of the people that you brought up, I'd like to thank, you know, everybody that helped me out in my entire career. I wish that all of them could have been with me at every single fight. You know, I wish that I could have 10 corners in the UFC. Unfortunately, that's not the way it goes. And sometimes in this sport, you have to be selfish and do what's best for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that's stepping into that cage and risking your health and your life to do what you love. So, but all those people on the way up, you know, all the people from Top Notch, Jeff Neal, Overtime, Steve Marianetti, all the people that helped me along the way. I never forgot about that. I'm still in contact with all of them, and anything that they would ask me to do, I would do for them in a heartbeat. So, I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for all their help.
You know, like in terms of personalities and the things that kind of come with a fighter lifestyle, there is zero conflict happening in your life in regards to out of cage activities or issues. I mean, you're kind of one of those black and white guys. Like, this is who I am. This is what you're going to get. You know, you're not going to make the news. There's no crazy surprises behind the door. Do you know what I mean? Like, not, you're kind of like a rare, like Darren Elkins falls in that category as well.
Yeah.
You're a rarity. Like, you're not, you know, racing motorcycles at 200 miles an hour down the highway and stuff like that.
No, I got a Harley. I just like to cruise around on that sucker. But I think that just comes from my upbringing, you know, being raised by a person like my dad. I'm a straight shooter like he is. And, luckily early on in my career, a little bit after I got into the WEC, I met the right girl who I ended up marrying, and I have 3 beautiful children with now.
Yeah.
And, you know, talking about thanking people, you know, I have to thank her because sticking behind a fighter, man, you know, fight life is hard. And we went through a lot of hardships in our relationships, you know, especially me having to travel to Miami. There was a point where I was a month in Miami, a month in Chicago. And it was like that for like a year or two, where I was just going back and forth, training in Miami, coming back to Chicago, you know, and she stuck with me through all of that. And she was there for every fight that, you know, we were together, a huge support. And, you know, I would have been able to do it without her too. And then, you know, giving me the 3 children that we have together, that was just another huge motivation in my career, because I was no longer fighting for myself. I was fighting for them.
Yeah. You know, it's also, when you're on the road, I'm on the road a lot for BKFC. The one thing that I can thank God for is that I know everything at home is cool.
Yeah.
Like my wife, she's handling the kids. Everything is okay. And like, you see people that don't have that on the road, and it's like, man, like, I don't know how you do it. Like, you can't. Like, you need that consistency at home, and it's something that's underappreciated. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen training partners. I've seen it's finding the right person you're involved with is crucial to having a successful career. I've seen so many fighters, and, you know, like Baboon is one of them, man. Like, he finally found the right girl, though. Right now, and that's why he's doing so well in his career. But I think being in Miami and, you know, everything that comes by you down there, you get involved with the wrong girl sometimes, and it'll affect your career. I've seen it happen to training partners. I've seen it happen to people that I coach. That's why when I found the right one, I knew I had to hang on to her. So it was another lucky thing that I had in my career, was just finding the right person.
What about the temptations of Miami? How difficult was it just to like leave?
There was no time for me to have any temptations. Yeah. There was no time. It was like when I first started training in Miami, like Daniel and Cesar are old school they got that old school mentality when it comes to training, right? It's wake up, train. Like we were going live twice a day. I'd spar in the mornings, I'd roll live at night. And then like in between that, I'm doing conditioning, I'm running, I'm hitting my weights. So there was no time for anything else. Like it was literally wake up, go to the gym, come home, eat, sleep, wake up, go to the gym, come home, eat, sleep, redo it again the next day.
That's Baboon's habits too. Like it's like you do. I think he's one of the top 1% in terms of disciplined fighters and individuals. And I mean, I know he was your roommate, Tyler Goodjohn's living with him right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that guy should be a coach. He should have his own gym. He should be a life coach and MMA trainer.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that's been doing this for so long that he really found out the right formula on how to be successful now. And it wasn't always like that, Baboon.
No.
Baboon, you know, back in the days, he liked to party too. And
well, I mean, he came from a broken family, house full of children, a father not there, made the mistake, corrected it. You know, he talked about that in our interview with us. He's like, no, man, like I was repeating a cycle, broke it. He's incredibly loyal to his wife and family.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's important.
Yeah, I tell him all the time, like, I'm so happy that I feel like now he is kind of finally getting at least some recognition that he deserves for being the type of fighter that he is. And, you know, #1 pound for pound champ in BKFC right now. And he'll stay there for as long as he wants to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, his next fight, dude, I got your tickets, man. I've already talked to the guys. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Ricky, dude, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I've seen you locally. We've never really had the time to kind of interact like this, but your career is absolutely special. And in terms of like Illinois people, you certainly rank towards the top of the list of what this state has produced.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And anytime you want to rendezvous back, let me know.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Awesome. All right, brother. Do you think I'll see you at the next fight, man?
Yeah, sounds good. I'll see you later, Mike.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.